Welcome to the 492nd episode of the Jamie Delaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jamie Delaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome. Well, we are in the midst. This is the first time I've ever recorded a podcast in the midst of a Hurricane Helene. Luckily, I am the Southwest area of Florida, so she's just coming by, but so far, actually, I have had a little rain this morning, but I have fairly blue skies out there right now and some wind. So we're doing good. As promised, I have a special guest today, Addie Delaney Meinertz, our registered dietitian, and we're going to discuss some early childhood nutrition and a couple studies that look at type 1 diabetes in children and risk factors. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, that we'll go into a little bit more detail, is there's so many things out there that comes up on our news feeds, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or don't eat this, eat that, studies show, magazines, whatever. And they look scary. Sometimes they look good. And you really have to dive into them to see, does this, really mean anything at all? And a lot of studies out there are just people wanting to get something published. So they do something quick and dirty and they get a publication. But, in the end, more studies are needed. That's kind of how they all end. So before you take a study and apply it to your life, you really need to look into things in greater detail. That being said, more and more diseases are happening in children at younger and younger ages. Now we're also seeing adult onset diabetes in younger ages. But this type 1 diabetes that we're going to talk about today is an autoimmune disease that occurs in children. Typically, it is diagnosed before the age of 20, often in the early years, so 3 to 10 is probably one of the most prevalent type of age ranges, but it can be up to 20, type 1 diabetes, and in a few cases later, but for the most part, it's early childhood diagnosed. There is a genetic component, but there are a lot of people with the genetic components that never get type 1 diabetes, and the reality of it is type 1 is fairly rare, but if it occurs to your child, it is life-altering for you and your family. So if there was something we could do to prevent it, we should. So we want to look at this study today about different things that you can eat or not eat. So welcome, Addie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, we're excited to talk about this because I think it's important to talk about childhood nutrition because we know that things don't just pop up later in life. They had to start somewhere. It's not like you just hit 50 and things happen. But also on the other side of the coin, I'm obviously in that stage of life where I have young kids. I'm around that conversation often, in addition to my job as a dietitian. And a lot of the common theme is these kids are indestructible, right? They can just eat whatever they want. Things just happen to them. It's not because of any, thing that we're giving them. And I don't think anybody wants to point a finger because, not that we're doing that either, but there's usually causation for a lot of these things that we're seeing, and we are seeing an increase in this type 1 diabetes. A couple of things that I love that this piece talked about was not just the food too, but also microbiome and gut permeability, which begins gestationally, so you begin collecting good gut microbiome in the womb. We know vaginal delivery is best if able. And then once you are born, you contain a very similar microbiome to your mother, but then environmental and nutrition factors start to take place. If you're, nursing your child, you're still sharing that gut microbiome. And what you're consuming is affecting their microbiome. So a lot of times we have this, I feel like, free period of life, right? Where if you're pregnant, you're hungry, you can eat whatever you want. Or your kids are young, they can eat whatever they want. They're going to be picky. All kids are picky. There's nothing you can do about it. And I just feel like it starts parents off with this defeated idea But then you're double defeated if something like this happens to your kid, or you're trying to prevent something like this. What can we do to do, on the opposite end? How do we play offense against these factors? So I think it's a good topic for us to chat about today.
All right. So this particular study that caught both of our eyes, eating more oats, fruits in early childhood may increase the risk of diabetes. So it was a longitudinal analysis. It makes it look like, okay, they looked over time to see if more rye, oats, fruits, berries, cruciferous vegetables had anything to do with diabetes. There was 5,674 children that all had a genetic susceptibility to type 1 diabetes. And these patients were selected from another study that was a type 1 diabetes prediction and prevention studies. So you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about how they did these, how they got their data?
Yes. So, when you look at a study, you want to make sure there's a big population. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, cool. They had this great big population of kids. What I guess has me kind of on the fence from the jump is, so dietary intake was assessed by repeated 3-day food logs or food records from the children's age 3 months till they were 6 years old. Sounds fantastic. However, I will tell you, as a dietitian who requests food logs, especially with the first few visits I have with patients, the accuracy and the compliance factor to actually complete them as your day is going versus trying to retrospectively go back and recall, it skews the accuracy incredibly. So right there, I'm like, are they getting 3 of the best days of the week? Are we missing on these other foods that are coming in? So I would like to know more. They don't share that, obviously. And so that's where my accuracy red flag number 1 comes in. But so they collected these food logs, and then they had their 3 endpoints of the presence of these islet cells and the autoimmunity. And then they looked at progression to type 1 diabetes. So the children who began the study just had the genetic susceptibility. They weren't starting at type 1. So of the 5,674 children who were part of the study, 247 had the islet cell antibodies plus a biochemical islet autoimmunity. 206 progressed to the islet autoimmunity for multiple islet cell antibodies. But then only 94, again, out of that 5,674 children, developed type 1 diabetes.
1.6.
It's only 1.6%. So I'm not saying minimal, awful that happened. However, very, very tiny percentage. It then goes on to discuss foods that they selected that rose the instance of progression to type 1 diabetes. And they had a correlation, they suggested a correlation with bananas and with fermented dairy, wheat, and oats. They had a negative correlation with cruciferous vegetables and berries. So they thought that those foods, berries and cruciferous vegetables, decrease the risk of progression to type 1 diabetes. However, my flag as well, when I'm even looking at someone with autoimmune, or I'm looking at someone with food allergen potential, it is very hard to select out certain foods. How often were these foods eaten? It doesn't express that. What types were they? Were these children breastfed or formula fed? What were their other risk factors? So they select these foods that they're going to put out there, but kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg type of a thing. So are they eating these foods, high calorie dense foods, or higher carbohydrate foods? Is that what, is that the suggestion after they already have this predisposition to type 1 diabetes, and then they're not able to, consume them, or, which comes first here, and how did they select these out of all the foods eaten from 3 months to 6 years of age out of, 3 logs a week?
Yeah, and I think that, with food logs, everybody wants to get an A on their food reporting. So the bias is always towards we're going to select the best foods that our children ate. Most people aren't going to say, it was Captain Crunch and, Sugar Pops and all that. So a lot of people are going to try to get an A on it. The other thing is
also subconsciously makes you make better choices too. Like, you don't even think about it, but oftentimes when I do food logs, people, they're snacking less, they're eating more balanced meals, they increase their fiber. But as soon as they come off of it, if I don't do it as a practice tool, I just do it as an intake tool, they go right back to what they were doing. And I've even had people tell me that.
Well, and then, as far as healthier choices may be associated with educational level for parents, again, mindfulness in the parents' house, whether or not they had a good diet as well. So, I mean, it really changes things. A father, and of course, we don't have any parental history. They said they had an increased risk in the study, but if your dad has type 1 diabetes, it increases your risk by 1.6%. If your mother had type 1 diabetes, it's actually somewhat protective, so it may turn off a gene. So depending on, family history, it also plays a role. And of course, one of the things that we do know as well with type 1 diabetes is there is a viral association or infectious disease. So enteral viruses that children were exposed to in the first years of life increases the risk of type 1 diabetes. So, we don't know about that. We don't know vaccine history. Again, with other adjuvants in vaccine that may also increase the risk for autoimmune disease. And then, the other thing that we're going to talk about a lot is, most of the time when kids have oats, they have dairy. Dairy is a big part of most young children's nutritional composition. So, those are all, parts that could increase the incidence. So, end result, to throw fruit out by saying it might increase the risk of type 1 diabetes is, I really don't think there's any merit for that. I do think there is merit to say, hey, there may be a dietary correlation between genetic risk and type 1 diabetes, but we don't really have it figured out. And in this next thing that we're going to look at a little bit is another study. If there was one major thing you could do to decrease the risk of type 1 diabetes in your child, would you be willing to do it? If there's one big thing. So, maybe you have a banana here or there, you have broccoli here or there, but what's the big thing in a diet that you could change that might decrease your incidence of type 1 diabetes? And I think we're going to progress to suggest that.
Yes. So a study that we liked a lot more based off of, one, the extensiveness of it. And, they multifactorial. So they looked at mice studies, they looked in human studies, is A1 beta casein, milk protein, and other environmental predisposing factors for type 1 diabetes. So this study really went into, so there are these two main casein, which is, you have two main proteins in milk. You have casein and you have whey. So if you've seen the protein powders out there, most of them are whey protein powders. Casein is the other protein that is found in milk. And so it pulled out. So you have these two different caseins, though, that are found in cow's milk. You have an A1 beta casein and an A2 beta casein. It has been shown that the A1 beta casein, because of its organic chemistry, it is more related to an increased risk of type 1 diabetes development they look, and I like that they compared it. So human milk, mother's milk, the beta casein in there is more of the A2 type. So again, you're not consuming the same type when you have breast milk involved. And so what this study went and took a peek at is, okay, incidence of type 1 diabetes progression with introduction of cow's milk early in life, introduction of cow's milk and lack of breastfeeding, length of breastfeeding, if at all, mother as well. There's some idea too of her, intake of cow's milk. And so it looked at this. And so I really think this is a great study for us to break down too, because this isn't the first that can directly link cow's milk to this autoimmune response. And it really also breaks down to, again, like I spoke earlier about, we as dietitians know when we're giving dietary advice, you're not supposed to have a baby consume dairy prior to 1 year of age. And if you've gone to a pediatrician with your child, they'll probably tell you the same thing. Breast is best, if they even go that far to say that, but a lot of them have pamphlets for formula out there. But you're not supposed to introduce other milks like a cow's milk until 12 months of age or older. However, if you look at infant formulas, they are predominantly made from cow's milk. So the reason behind that is that suggestion to not have dairy in general is your intestinal lining formation in an infant is still maturing. That's why we don't feed kids food right out the gate. It's not because they don't have teeth, but there's still fairly big holes in your intestinal lining that have to form. And so these big protein molecules in cow's milk can leak through, for lack of a better word. And so your gut permeability can affect these autoimmune responses. So we don't want you to have cow's milk. However, we're going to put it in infant formula. And then it may sneak in once kids start to get introduced to foods and snack foods and things like that at 6 months if you're not paying attention to what you're giving your child. And so we're going to kind of break this down, if you want to take it further there, of this response that they're seeing.
Yeah, so to kind of start, at the genetic level, there are a couple different gene sequences that are associated with type 1 diabetes. And they talked about this in the introduction of the study a little bit, looking at different countries and the incidence of type 1 diabetes. And again, back to what I said before, it's rare to develop type 1 diabetic, even if you have the gene for diabetes. And we talk about the whole thing of epigenetics. You have to turn on a gene. A lot of people's like, oh, it's not my fault, I just have bad genes. Well, you have to turn on a gene. And proteins turn on genes. Some sort of protein, whether it comes from where it comes from, but usually a protein turns on a gene, and then that gene is expressed. We know that Eastern European countries have more type 1 diabetes than Western European countries. Finland has the highest incidence of type 1 diabetes, Norway, Sweden, and Canada. Highest, again, it's associated with dairy. Venezuela, Japan, some of the lowest incidence of type 1 diabetes. Takes it back to Dr. Campbell's China study, with the dairy and incidences of breast cancer even. But we know that dairy is it was an accelerant to liver cancer in kids that were exposed to aflatoxin. So there's something in dairy, and it comes down to that casein protein that really works on turning on genes that may be susceptible. The other interesting thing is in China, since 1989, they've had a much higher risk of diabetes, and has been associated with the increased risk or increased use of dairy. So we have these population studies, observational studies, but now we're going back to this study and looking at, specific interactions with the casein proteins. And there are actually two different kinds of protein. There's an alpha 1 protein and an alpha 2. And it turns out that the alpha 1 is, is really the one that's more associated with stimulating the development of type 1 diabetes. And again, the gut, and, when we look at, the age of the child, are also, looking at, those factors that interact. The other thing about the formulas, hydrolyzed formulas, if you look on the back of your infant formulas, I dare you to go to, your grocery store and turn over a couple boxes of infant formula and see all the different things that are in there. They're basically chemistry experiments. But when they hydrolyze or break down the proteins, again, because of the gut being less mature, if they break down and they're smaller, chances are they're a little bit more protected. But there were studies back, even with hydrolyzed casein proteins, hydrolyzed cow's milk, there still was an incidence of a slight increase in diabetes, type 1 diabetes. So just because it says it's hydrolyzed, it's not completely protected. But if you're pushed up against the wall, definitely you want hydrolyzed versus intact proteins.
Right. And that's just, for that permeability purposes. And that goes for, introduction to foods too. That's why it's so important to be selective when you're introducing foods, because they're still growing. But I thought, kind of a plug here for breastfeeding, because what this study looked at was, it saw the greatest risk for when breastfeeding lasted less than 3 months. So that was, so barely any breastfeeding's early introduction to formula is when it saw an increased risk. And so, when it looked at, I saw, when they looked at babies born in 2019, at 1 month, 78.6% had some breast milk. So not exclusive, but by 6 months, 55.8% had some breast milk, but only 24.9% were being exclusively breastfed at 6 months of age. So, and I think a lot, that's a misnomer out there too, is some people think, well, I just got to get to 6 months. But really, the longer you can prolong that, whether you're breastfeeding or pumping, you don't have to rely on these manufactured infant formulas that are introducing these, created proteins. And so, they really suggested that the earlier introduction to formulas really, and cow's milk, because there are other options out there, so if you pinpoint early on that your child has, a dairy allergy or something like that, there are soy formulas, there are other types out there. But the predominant one out there is of cow's milk variety. And so the earlier introduction to these greatly increases the autoimmune response.
Yeah, and so if you put like these enteroviral infection at a young age, and then
the foreign proteins.
Yeah, foreign proteins you markedly increase. So, nothing occurs in a vacuum, but if you look at what, you might not be able to avoid a virus, and there are bovine viral viruses that are in pasteurized cow's milk that are not completely filtered out, that are also linked to increasing risk of type 1 diabetes. So, a viral infection in a child with a immature gut can really increase susceptibility to, autoimmune diseases. Same way with adding the cereals before 3 months also can increase autoimmune immunity. This difference between A1 and A2 casein protein there's a little interesting fact that I saw about that. So the only difference between A1 casein and A2 casein is a single amino acid in the insertion of histidine. And the interesting thing about it is, if you look at human breast milk, it is more like A2. I'm going to really confuse people. It's more like the less less problematic casein, A2, because it has the proline just like human breast milk. So, that's another red flag to look at dairy as far as having these, different amino acid sequence that are, again, foreign proteins to a developing child that increases the risk. So, again, if we, it's one of the things that you can do is just substitute a plant milk for dairy and, take this out of the equation. But it's, what do? We, cow's milk, cheese, like you say, cheese products on everything, milk with everything, the school system, a lot of funding for school system, make it mandatory that they have dairy milk in the cafeteria program, and they lose funding. So it's everywhere.
Yeah, no, the government subsidies have created our food system business of corruption. And that's another reason why, we're reading these studies. I highly encourage you, if you see one of these clickbait studies out there, that you take a peek at who's funding the study, who's putting the information out there. You're never going to see on the Today Show or Good Morning America the dairy situation being bashed or questioned, because, again, these government subsidies are funding a lot of this. And so, you have to go through and sift through these ingredients yourself. And it is quite alarming, like you said, when you realize how prevalent these ingredients are. I mean, they are regular fillers and things.
Yeah, I was just, the banana thing. Bananas are thrown under the bus quite a bit.
Oh my gosh, it's everybody's problem. Bananas and grapes.
Bananas and grapes. But so I had the opportunity to compare bananas to a very popular cereal. I happen to be living in an experiment in poor nutrition currently in my house. I am hosting some young adults college kids that really, are eating what they want and have a very limited palate. And so my house guests came to my house carrying Frosted Flakes as their breakfast choice. So forget the sourdough bread, or forget the buckwheat pancakes, or fruit and chia seeds. We're going oatmeal. We're going full-fledged Frosted Flakes. So I had the opportunity to actually take a picture of the nutritional ingredients without even going to the store today, and comparing it to a banana. So, and I have just harvested a large bunch of bananas from my banana tree out back. They are Thai bananas. They're short and round and delicious. A banana has about 120 calories. So bananas aren't free calories. There are calories associated with them. And there is 1 gram of protein in a banana. Some people say that, you can't get any protein from bananas. And remember, I had the patient that ate 17 bananas a day. So that would be 17 grams of protein just from his bananas.
There you go.
31 grams of carbohydrate and 4 grams of fiber. Sugar content in the form of glucose and fructose, 17 grams, but this is not just your, processed refined sugar. It's the natural sugars in a banana. So, and there's essentially no fat in a banana. There might be some, it's one of those things that, it's less than 1%. So we don't have to put it on the nutrition label. But again, a great source of food. If you look at it, you get 4 grams of fiber. If you're trying to eat 40 bananas, you got 40 grams of fiber. If you lived on bananas, you'd probably be all right. People think that bananas are constipating, but, again, they're a source of fiber. Frosted Flakes, on the other hand, 1 cup is the serving size. I think most people eat more than 1 cup when they eat a serving size of Frosted Flakes. But anyway, 130 calories, so similar to the banana. They have 33 grams of carbohydrate. However, their carbohydrate associated with 12 grams of added processed sugar, milled and everything else. And they only have 1 gram of fiber. So
you are sucking that glucose right up and sucking it right out.
Right. It is just pure sugar, hummingbird feeder quality sugar that you're in a malt flavor. And I have no idea. I didn't have time to look and see what malt flavor is, but there can be a variety of different things in malt flavors. And the other thing you have to worry about when you look at some of these things, natural flavors. Natural flavors could mean anything and often mean MSGs. So malt flavor is.
Malt flavor can be a variety of things. It can be a barley malt extract or syrup. This is a common ingredient for malt flavoring. Corn syrup. Malt flavoring can be made from combining barley malt extract or syrup with corn syrup, and a few other grains can be made. So I'm going to go with it's probably more corn syrup because that's the cheapest one.
Right, and it's probably more genetically modified corn syrup because I do not believe that Frosted Flakes gets the certified organic label on it. And most of the product from that company are actually genetically modified products. So
high glyphosate.
And a high glyphosate level. So when we look at things like that and affecting your gut microbiome, glyphosate is
autoimmune.
Yes. So I would rather see you have a bowl of bananas with some plant milk than a bowl of Frosted Flakes.
Which would also increase your protein.
Yes. But if you had, and often, again, I talk about my breakfast. It's a tablespoon of chia seeds, has protein, omega-3s, soy milk, proteins, and then my fruit. Vitamin C, antioxidants, and all those things. And again, gram of protein and all, every cup of fruit. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good breakfast along with my sourdough.
Just to touch on breakfast options, I have a list of a few of our favorite because I know that is something that you wanted to go over because we like variety here. But I will tell you, one of the biggest things we do in our house is, we're exclusively organic soy milk drinkers. That's the best one for your kids. If they like the taste, do soy milk. Keep it simple. When you're looking at cereals and things for your kids in the morning, it's hard to find them without a ton of added sugars. Do your best. A lot of the plant-based, there's some new milks out there that are targeted for kids. While I do like their nutrient profile, if your kids can do a straight up organic soy milk on their cereal, that's a little bit better because they do add a little bit of sugar, not a tremendous amount, but it makes these milks a little more palatable to kids, which, kind of lesser of two evils. We can get the nutrients in, that's one thing. But if we can do an organic soy milk, keep it easy. They're usually cheaper. That's what I'd go for. We do a lot of overnight oats here, like you said, with chia seeds, organic oats and berries and bananas, and then cinnamon and things like that. Now, Caleb does occasionally, he's like, can we do cereal? So we do a couple different organic cereals. I do like Nature's Path. And then one of my favorites is Three Wishes. And it's a very limited ingredient cereal brand. They have less sugar, more proteins, kind of their thing. And they're also gluten-free if that's something you're looking for, but their base is chickpeas, actually. So that is one option. And they are only for 1 cup, 3 grams of added sugar. So that's it. Some of my other options, like you mentioned, your buckwheat pancakes, or we do oat pancakes here. We blend up our oats and flour and things like that and season them up. Caleb loves chocolate chips. So on the weekends, if we're feeling fancy, maybe we'll throw some of those on there. If you make them on the weekend and you freeze them, or you make some waffles and you freeze them, they're the same as when you buy them already, except you made them at home. So you just pop them in the toaster and for a fun weekday breakfast. English muffins, sprouted English muffins, like the Ezekiel brand, they make a cinnamon raisin. Fun fact, if you do a sprouted grain, it has a little bit more nutrient absorption power. So it gives you that benefit. Also, they're very high fiber. That with a little jam and maybe a natural nut butter, and some fruit on the side. Makes for a nice, tasty, quick breakfast. We've done oatmeal bakes. I've had folks who want to increase their protein for breakfast. I'll have them do a quinoa type cereal versus an oat to bump them up that way. We've done teff. So, and those are just more of the sweeter options. Then you got your tofu scramble. So there's a lot of different options out there for breakfast that get you more fiber, more protein, less sugar, and are going to be a much better kickstart to your day. And most of the ones I just rattled off don't take a whole lot of time to prep.
And I will also tell you about my sourdough bread, because the sourdough.
She is the sourdough queen.
And the queen of sourdough. And because and you can take a scoop of your sourdough starter. You can even take the discard and make a quick pancake. So if I want a pancake during the week, pancake for one, so to speak, in the morning, a little sourdough starter, soy milk, and you're good to go to make a quick pancake if that's what you like. But the sourdough, the fermenting breaks down the gluten. So people that think they're gluten sensitive or perhaps even gluten tolerant, and there's even some newer studies looking at celiac disease, that sourdough fermentation that breaks down the gluten enough that they don't have a reaction. So if you think you're gluten sensitive, look to sourdough and sourdough starters. So I make my pizza crust out of sourdough bread. We do add it to the pancake mix. So that fermentation really helps your gut with good bacteria, multiple different varieties of bacteria and yeast that are very good for your gut microbiome. So that's also a good breakfast. When I looked up under the, one of the other things is the environmental working group. If you want to look up something, you can see whether or not it's kind of on a good or bad list and some of the toxicities in it, but they listed their most highly sugar cereal as Sugar Smacks, malted golden something flakes, and Apple Jacks and Fruit Loops. I was disappointed that my Cocoa Krispies of yesteryear, when I was growing up, did not make the list. And I did not like Apple Jacks, for the record, when I was, or Fruit Loops when I was young. I was strictly a Cocoa Puffs or Cocoa Krispies. But yeah, back in the day. So, yes, you can change. And, it'd be nice to have had a box of those from 68 versus 2014, 2024.
Yeah, I just sent you that thing that showed the difference in ingredients. It is crazy. Now, this time of year, I have to tell you all, I do giggle because, all the Halloween cereals come out. And the doc here, when I was growing up, I liked Boo Berry and she liked Count Chocula.
Always, I never, now I am such a fruit person that, I have all kinds of fruit all the time, and I panic if I'm running low on a variety. I just, and I laughed the other day, I just had I was running low and didn't want to go to the grocery store. I was down to grapes, bananas, frozen mango. I don't know, but I had less than 5 different varieties of fruit available to me, and I was starting to panic. But in yesteryear, that would have had to be chocolate in the word of something, that was how I never ate chocolate bars so much, but something had to be involved somehow. So how I've progressed, that my chocolate is down to cacao powder into my desserts, as opposed to every name of processed food for breakfast had to have chocolate in the ingredient. So you can change. It's just a matter of being a little bit more aware. And again, when it comes down to open to a little bit of change. Yeah. And again, as our good friend Tim Marie says, finding a way that your child may like something prepared differently. So, adding different things into, I know my oatmeal progression went from, again, if I had to have oats, when I was young, it had to have brown sugar, and then I progressed as I became an adult to maybe dates and raisins, because it had to be sweet. And then I progressed to, bananas and mango work, so I don't have to have dried fruit on my oatmeal necessarily to tolerate it. It's not the number one ingredient, in my oatmeal. So your palate evolves over time. And when you're working with children, especially, you have a blank slate. And
Yes.
introducing healthy foods make them crave healthy foods,
Yes.
which is extremely helpful.
And they also
And
mimic what we do. So if they are even, it's been shown that even if they are apprehensive to trying these foods, first just exposing them to seeing it. They see it in the fridge, they see it in the grocery cart, they see you eating it. Then it's like, okay, we have a 2 bite rule. You have to try to chew it twice, and you have to chew it well. And then we talk about, what we like and didn't like about it, if there's anything like that. Caleb's a texture guy, so sometimes, that's part of the chat there. But, something I will say encouraging too is, and a reason I wanted to bring up these studies as well is, they bash fruit, and fruit gets a lot of bashing because of the sugar. We talked about added sugar in some of these things. Fruit is wonderful, and it's wonderful for kids. So kids, especially babies, they have much more sweet taste receptors on their tongue than they do savory. So that is why babies, keeps them surviving. They seek out the sweetness in mother's milk. So breast milk is naturally sweet. It's a higher in glucose factor. And so that is why babies like to nurse. That's why they seek that out. That's why they get very aggressive and hungry as well. And when they smell mama near, they can actually smell. If you just looked at a baby in the dark, if daddy walks in the room versus mama, they will act differently because they can smell her in there. You smell like breakfast. Same thing. That's why they make formula that way. But that's why your kids might often like fruit initially more than they like vegetables, or maybe open to trying fruits a little bit more than they are vegetables because they just taste sweet a little bit easier. And so I want to encourage you, do not panic if you can only get your child to eat one floret of broccoli, but they'll eat, a half a cup of strawberries along with their lunch. They're getting fiber, they're getting antioxidants, they're getting vitamin C from those strawberries. They aren't just getting sugar like they're eating a bag of candy. They're getting a lot of beneficial phytonutrients there. So keep vegetables coming, but if you have to work in fiber and phytonutrients through fruit, that is A-okay.
And again, Whole Foods, it's cheaper. If you look at your grocery bill, if you're buying fruits and vegetables and things that aren't in a box, your grocery bill is going to be cheaper than if you buy box processed foods. They're much more expensive. If you look at a box of cereal, again, that Frosted Flakes box, I think only had perhaps it was very limited amount of servings per 1 cup serving. So it's not like you get a full box of cereal. You're paying a lot of money for just a few servings. The other thing that's a really good site is foodbabe.com. Her name is Ms. Hari. She has, I can't remember her first name, but she has taken to looking at products, fast food products, different cereal products, and really taking on manufacturers as far as looking what the ingredients is. And I was just, kind of scouring her site as well. Pizza is a big thing that we gravitate to. Pizza night. Everybody wants pizza night, but typically people go out and get pizza. And if they're getting pizza from, a variety of the large chains, the question is what is actually in the pizza. And a lot of the pizza places like, Domino's, sort of Pizza Hut, the varieties, Papa John's, they do not list all of their ingredients. And one of the things, in total, so to speak. And what I didn't realize is there's a lot of MSGs in, these pizzas, which are used, MSGs, monosodium glutamate, and it has a different, and it's a hydrolyzed soy protein. So this is a chemical that's, that's made, that's a flavor enhancer and makes people want more, makes things taste saltier, that, can be in a variety of different, there's like a whole list of different names it can be, but it's associated again with reacting to the gut microbiome, headaches, dizziness, all kinds of different GI disturbances. And we have this gut brain reaction that these things can alter. And again, they're actually called excitotoxins because of what they do, whether it's cancer cell growth or neuron exciting type of things, and maybe just a little bit. But if it's in every processed food that you come across, but it's given a different name, soy lecithin, again, hydrolyzed soy protein. We think soy protein is not bad, but hydrolyzed, if it's a chemical process that uses all kinds of different means, then the potential to have an accumulation of toxins in your daily diet is very prevalent. There's 38% of baby foods, have pesticides in them. So it can be very hard, yes, you could maybe the FDA says you can have so many micrograms of something, but how do you add that up during the day? If you're eating a variety of processed foods and takeout foods, and then, don't even start on the containers and everything else that these processed foods are associated with. So, Addie and I are really, really interested in and helping people navigate so that you don't have to rely on these products so much. Every once in a while, a product, but how do you navigate which one, if you're going to do once in a while, do you do? And how can you kind of go back to kind of square one to the more natural ingredients of whole fruits and vegetables?
Right. And bring it back to basics. You don't have to go to these crazy fancy grocery stores and buy all these packaged items, right? You can just go to your local grocery store and get basic fruits and vegetables, grains, potatoes, your seasonings and spices. We love our organic soy here. So our tofu, your veggies, and create really good meals for your family. And, we even talk about preparation tools and storage, and how can you reduce your exposure to certain toxins. And so really it's not about putting in crazy fancy things. We're really more about bringing it back to basics and simplifying it and helping you do so. And it is not about becoming overwhelmed with perfection and nailing it all, but how can you create this healthy baseline that carries you from day to day, so that that in general, you are promoting health for you and your family, and you're playing offense, not defense.
Yes. And, your passion is young families. And, we want to offer our services to young families. You're more than happy to consult with them and help guide them. And again, work through picky eaters, work through potential allergens. What do you get for the biggest bang for your buck? If you can take one takeaway from today is get dairy out of your diet. Get dairy out of your diet. That is the biggest thing. Get dairy out of your kids' diet. It's not a necessity that they drink cow's milk by any means. And it's probably one of the most dangerous things that they come in contact with. One of the most addictive things, because there are morphine-like substances in cow's milk that make the baby cow want to have nurse from the mother cow. So
insulin like growth factor, high levels of estrogen.
So get these things, to get this out first. And again, give us a call. You can email Addie at drdelaney.com for a consultation. I think you'd be more than willing, no matter what your age is, but certainly young families is, it's particularly needed to get these young families back to basics. I know a lot of grandparents will say, well, you can't tell them anything, but Addie could. Addie could tell them.
No, and I think too, it's, as a mom, and you tease me about this all the time, I immediately feel guilty for everything. But I think there's no reason to feel guilty for choices you may have made if you actively are trying to do better. Because that's what we tell our kids. You made a mistake, but we're not going to beat you over the head with that mistake for the rest of your life. We were just talking to Caleb yesterday, like, okay, was this a good choice or a bad choice? No. Okay, how can we make better choices? So if we want them to do that with their behavior, we owe it to them to do that with the nutrition we're bringing into our home. How do we make better choices? And so, and we're not even about, if you want to be like, well, I could never be 100% plant-based. I'm not looking for that. We want to help families bring things back into your home, into your kitchen, put you in the driver's seat of the health of you and your family. And yes, we are plant focused for sure, because there is power in that. But we will meet you where you're at and help you get to the level you'd like to be.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Thank you for
Thank you.
During Hurricane Helene. It's starting to get a little windy here right now, so maybe we'll get a few bands. To all our neighbors in Florida and north and to Tallahassee and up the middle of the United States, be safe.
Prayers with y'all. We've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So
yeah, heed the evacuation warning. I think the scariest thing to me is the flooding potential in places. You can run from wind, you can hide from wind, but you have to run from water. And so if you are in an evacuation zone, I hope that you have evacuated. So stay plant strong, eat your veggies, move
eat
a
your
little,
fruit.
Eat your fruit, have a banana.
On us. Cheers.
Cheers to bananas. Thank you, Addie. Talk to you soon.
Bye.